In this video, I'll be sharing with you a tutorial on how to cut this stylish princess dart halter neck gown. So if this is something you like, kindly hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, leave your comment at the comment section. So to start, I've gone ahead to mark out my basic measurements for this pattern, which includes my shoulder to bust, under bust, waist, and 7 inches to get your hip point, then your blouse length. So I'm going to start by marking my shoulder divided by 2 on my pattern. My shoulder is 14 inches divided by 2, I have 7. I'll come down by 1 inch at this point and then mark a basic neckline of 3 inches. I'll be using 3 by 3 inches for mine, but the neckline we have there is high. You can use 3 by 2.5 inches. Now I'll connect from that my shoulder slant to my neckline. To find your chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and I'll make a mark there. Now, I'll place my tape and I'll mark back my shoulder divided by 2 on the chest line. I'll go ahead to place my ruler and I'll connect this all the way to the upper part of my pattern. Now, I'll be dividing my armhole into 2 equal parts and I'll come in by ½ inch there. Go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. Now I'll connect this all the way to the upper part and I'll also connect this to the armhole, to the midpoint of the armhole. Now I'll start by marking my dart, which I'll mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches, which I'll go ahead mark all the way from the upper part of my pattern to the lower part. Now I'll place my ruler and I'm going to connect this, starting from the bust to the under bust, to the waist, to the hip and to the gown length. Now after I'm done marking this from the midpoint I have at my armhole, I'll connect this going all the way to that point. Now I'm going to mark my dart intake of ½ inch here, 1.5 here. Now if you're plus size, mark 1 here and mark 2 inches here. Now repeat those measurements and you're going to take it all the way to the lower part. So I'm extending my dart all the way to the lower part. Now it's easy to work with a straight dart, that is why I am just using this. Now I'll go ahead to extend this all the way to the lower part of my pattern, and I'm also going to go ahead to extend this going all the way down, right? So after extending to my gown length, go ahead to use my marker to outline my pattern, and after outlining, place my curve drew, connect from the bust all the way down to the under bust of my pattern. And after connecting at this side, I'll also go ahead to connect to the other side of my pattern, right? Now I'm going to mark ½ inch dart intake on both sides of my pattern, and I'll be blending this out to the initial dart that we have on my pattern. Now this ½ inch on both sides is 1 inch, and I'll extend it to the lower part and connect. This is because when you're joining your princess dart, the side pattern tends to be shorter. Here I will mark my bust circumference divided by 4, measure that dart intake we have at the armhole and add my sewing allowance. Here I will mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake I have here, replace and then add my sewing allowance. Here I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 and I'll measure the dart intake I have here and replace it, then add my sewing allowance. Now at the hip, I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake I have here, and I'm going to add my sewing allowance. Now I'm just going to go ahead to take out 1.5 inches from what I have at the waistline and mark at the lower part. If you don't want it to be too fitted, you can minus like 2 inches from your hip and mark at the lower part of your pattern. Now the next step I'll take is to go ahead to place my ruler, and I'm going to go ahead to connect from the bust, under bust, waist, hip point and then the gown length of my dress, right? So after I'm done marking this, I'll go ahead to use my marker and I'm going to go ahead to outline this. After I'm done outlining, I'm going to outline the upper part of my pattern. Now I'll measure about 2 inches here to create the halter neck, connect, blend in what I have here and connect to the armhole. I'll just make this design to indicate that we have this design at the center of this pattern. After that, I'll just go ahead and cut out this pattern. If you have any question regarding this pattern drafting, please kindly leave your question at the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please go ahead to hit on the subscribe button. Now, after cutting this, we're also going to go ahead to cut out the back pattern of this dress. So this is what I have. Moving over to the back pattern of this dress, I have marked my measurement. I marked a neckline of 3 inches by 1, my shoulder divided by 2, and marked out my armhole. Here's my shoulder to bust, shoulder to waist, 7 inches for your hip point, and gown length, right? So I made the back shorter so that the pattern paper I have will be enough. I also added a zipper allowance of 1.5 inches to the front part of my pattern. So now I'll start by marking my dart for my pattern. I'll mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and I'll be taking this measurement towards the lower part of my pattern, and I'm going to place my ruler to connect this all the way down to the lower part. So after I'm done connecting, that is when I'll mark my dart. I'll be marking a dart intake of 1/2 inch on both sides, and I'll come down by 1 inch here. After I'm done connecting, I'll be extending my dart all the way up, and I'll extend this to the lower part. So while I was extending this to the lower part, I marked it all the way to the hip point, which is not supposed to touch. Correct that much later. Here I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, add my sewing allowance. Here I'll mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake I have here, replace, and add my sewing allowance. Here I'm just going to go ahead to reconnect that dart, just like I said. I'm just going to place my ruler, extend it to like 4 to 5 inches, and I will go ahead to outline. After outlining this, I will now insert my measurement at the hip part of my pattern. I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4 at this point, then add my sewing allowance. Now measure what you have starting after that zipper line. Go ahead to remove 1.5 inches from it, or 2 inches, depending on how fitted you want it to be at the back pattern of your dress. Now connect from the waist to the hip, to the hip point and to the lower part, and I'll cut this out. So after I'm done cutting this out, I'll cut out the neckline, the shoulder, and I'll cut out the armhole area. Now if you want to have that princess dart effect, all you have is divide your armhole into 2 and reconnect it at this pattern. Mark 2 inches for the outer neckline, and for the zipper, go ahead to come in by 1/2 inch here, extend this all the way to the lower part, and also extend it to the upper part of my pattern. After I'm done doing this, I'll just go ahead to cut out my pattern, and after I'm done cutting out, I'm done drafting out this pattern. So if you have any question, go ahead to ask.